What does the future hold for the first base position for the Pittsburgh Pirates? We're going to talk about that, plus the addition of Sarah Gels to the front office here on today's episode of Locked On Pirates.
You are Locked On Pirates, your daily Pittsburgh Pirates podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome back, everybody, to the Locked On Pirates podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates, every single day. My name is Ethan Smith, your host of this wonderful show. You can follow me right down there on my lower third at MVP_Ethan or at Locked On Pirates on Twitter or X. Hope you all are having a wonderful Thursday afternoon as the show's dropping around 2 p.m. Eastern time. So again, hope you guys are all enjoying the final day of November as we inch closer to the Christmas season and general manager winter meetings. And before we get into an eye at the future of the first base position for the Pittsburgh Pirates, just before I hit the record button, the Pittsburgh Pirates made an addition. Wasn't a player, though. It was an addition to the front office, and that addition is Sarah Gels, who has risen through the ranks of baseball since becoming a baseball operations intern for the Pittsburgh Pirates way back in 2009. Since she's been in the labor relations department as an intern for Major League Baseball, she's been a baseball operations intern, a coordinator of baseball analytics, a director of analytics and analysis, and a director of analytics and major league contracts with the Baltimore Orioles, spending almost 8 years with the Baltimore Orioles. She then moved up to the Houston Astros, where she spent time with them since 2018 for about 5 years as a program manager of research and development. She was also a director of research and development for those Houston Astros, who have won World Series titles in the time that Sarah Gels was there, and she will join General Manager Ben Cherington in the front office as the assistant general manager of the Pittsburgh Pirates. I think this is a very, very good pickup for this team. She was notarized as one of the top 12 rising executives in all of baseball. And I really think that she could come in and add a young thought process to what this Pirates team wants to do. I think she can add a lot to what Ben Cherington might be wanting to do and maybe even be integral in the development of a lot of these young players. So I figured I'd start the show by talking about that today because it's off-season news. It's something that we finally get to talk about. But of course, today's episode is an eye at the future. It's a continuation of a new series that I started yesterday. If you checked out the starting pitching one, I hope you guys all enjoyed it. This was supposed to be the third episode yesterday that I was supposed to release, but something came up, so I already have it ready to go for today. So when you look at first base for this Pittsburgh Pirates team, you look at this first base position and what it's been for this Pittsburgh Pirates team, really for a very long time. It has been a hole in what this Pirates team is trying to do. There have been some notable guys that have come in and made an impact. You look at Carlos Santana and Ji-Man Choi last season, fixing that position for about the first half of the year before they were both traded to Milwaukee and San Diego, respectively, to end up with Connor Joe pretty much manning that position all the time. You look before that, you had guys like Michael Chavis, you had Josh Van Meter at times, you had Mike Nagowski, you had Daniel Vogelbach. There has been a lot to left to be desired at the first base position for the Pittsburgh Pirates for quite some time. I mean, I would even argue that the last time you really had a very adequate first baseman over here in Pittsburgh was Pedro Alvarez. And then you have Josh Bell as well. But Josh Bell obviously had his defensive issues. And outside of a all-star first half in 2019, you really look at Josh Bell's overall career, and there wasn't much to like, honestly. And they eventually moved him to the Washington Nationals in a trade that has since not looked very good, with Will Crowe moving on from Pittsburgh and Eddie Yean still progressing through the system, but not even being in the top 30 MLB prospects for the Pittsburgh Pirates. So you look at what the position offers at this current moment, and a lot of us want the Pirates to go out and sign somebody to really fix this position. You've heard about the rumors of Vladimir Guerrero Jr. being involved in trade talks from the Toronto Blue Jays. You've heard about Pirates fans wanting Rhys Hoskins from Philadelphia following a season in which he did not play due to a season ending injury. You look at possibly bringing back a guy like Carlos Santana. We'll talk about all of that in the third segment of today's show. But I think if you're looking at the candidates that you have right now available to you on November 30th, Jared Triolo has to be that top option. And Jared Triolo has been a guy that a lot of Pirates fans have kind of fallen in love with a little bit. He's a guy that offers very, very good defense. I even mentioned on my show yesterday that if Jared Triolo on the Bleacher Report projected roster show, that if they can find a first baseman outside of Jared Triolo, that could really open up a spot for him to showcase his defense around the diamond and potentially be a utility Gold Glove finalist in 2024, which I think would be really, really fun for him. But he did really come on last season as the replacement to Ke'Bryan Hayes while Ke'Bryan Hayes was on the shelf with an injury. And since then, the Pirates just kept giving him chances. He was playing a little bit of shortstop. He was playing second base. Near the end of the season, he played some first base as well that we got to see, and he looked like he was pretty comfortable over there. And you look at his season overall, and he had almost 200 at-bats, 181 to be exact, 3 home runs, 21 RBIs, a 298 average, a 388 on base percentage, and a 786 OPS. So numbers that you really, really like to see. And he also, as I mentioned, near the end of the year, got some time at first base because I think the Pirates really wanted to see something from him. And in 52 and 1/3 innings at first base, he did all right. He also showcased his potential Gold Glove potential in 309 and 1/3 innings at third base in the absence of Ke'Bryan Hayes, as I mentioned. And he's proven again that he can play at first, he can play at second, he can play at shortstop, he can play at third. He ended up tallying a 5 outs above average and a +3 defensive value, which obviously both rank high on StatCast, and he didn't even play the full season in Pittsburgh. So you look at his averages, you look at the stats on paper, and you're saying, okay, Jared Triolo would be a pretty decent option at first base. Now, for me, I would like to see him add a little bit of power to his game. I think that would go a very long way for him without sacrificing a lot of that average. Now, if he goes down, he batted 298, nearly 300 last year. Let's say he dips into the 270s or the 260s, but he has double-digit home runs and is still hitting the ball pretty well for all things considered. I think a lot of people would take that, especially if he ends up being a very adequate defender over at first base. Those are things that I think the Pirates would be very, very interested in. And he's your best in-house option. Now, as I mentioned, Connor Joe is still on the roster. You could flirt with the idea of having Henry Davis move from right fielder to the catcher spot to that first base position as well, because I personally think it's a position that he could play. But when you look at the options that you have right now, and as you see on the right side of your screen, is this Jared Triolo's job to lose? As of right now, yes, it is. Even to me, if they go out, and as I mentioned yesterday, there is the possibility of CJ Cron and other guys like that. But I would still think that Triolo has the one up on a lot of these guys unless the Pirates go out and sign a major free agent and then allow Jared Triolo to kind of play that Josh Harrison utility role that Josh Harrison was so good in when they had Jordy Mercer and Neil Walker alongside a bunch of other pieces that they had in the infield. So Jared Triolo's job to lose right now. And I would say if he continues to progress and continues to be a very good baseball player for this team, he might be the future and what the future holds for this first base position. But you have to find that out. And I think a lot of figuring that out is going to be, does he add that power element to his game? Does he continue to progress offensively? Does he continue to progress defensively up to a state of where Ke'Bryan Hayes has been, now having won a Gold Glove? And is he just going to continue to be a valuable player for this team? He was last season. He was a very big surprise for this team. And I think going into 2024, that's another thing they want to see, is they want to see him take the next step, especially with the power off the bat, and continue to hit the baseball well. And if he can do those things, I think that's what the future holds for first base for him. if that's what they decide to do. Now, as far as what's in the minor leagues, there's not a lot. So how concerning is it that the Pirates don't really have much going on in the minor league system? We'll talk about that in just a moment. But first, we're going to talk about FanDuel. Folks, FanDuel Sportsbook is your number one place to do all of your sports betting this NFL season because FanDuel is America's number one sportsbook. And right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. That's $150 if your team wins. So if you think the Pittsburgh Steelers could straight up beat the 2-10 Arizona Cardinals this weekend and you're not a customer on FanDuel, folks, all you have to do is put $5 down on the Steelers to beat Arizona and you could win $150 instantly. And if you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is super easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options that include spreads, player props, over-unders, same-game parlays, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season because FanDuel is an official partner of the NFL and an official sponsor of the Locked On Podcast Network. And welcome, everybody, to segment 2 of today's episode of Locked On Pirates. But after this premiere, head over to Loss because Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On Plus, our national shows that cover every league. So go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. Folks, welcome back again to the Locked On Pirates podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates every day. Again, my name is Ethan Smith. You can follow me right there on Twitter or X at MVP Ethan or at Locked On Pirates. And on today's second segment, we're going to be talking about the prospects in the system right now for the Pittsburgh Pirates that could play first base. Excuse me. But you look at it, and we talked about this a lot on the An Eye at the Future episode for starting pitching, is that this system is very, very heavy on pitching. And I think that that is a very big tactic for Ben Cherington. I don't think that's a mistake. I think it's something that he's wanted to do for quite some time. And when you look at what the Pirates have done and what they've added, it's been pitching. So then you look around and you try to see the players that are big position-wise. You obviously have Termarr Johnson, who could be a rising star in the making starting next year. You look at Mitch Jebb, who they just drafted out of Michigan State. You look at a lot of other guys that are available, but a lot of them are still shortstops, or a lot of them are outfielders, or a lot of them are at second base. So when you look at first base specifically, there's a lack of prospects there that really, one, aren't highly touted, and two, are still kind of far away. And I think that second part is even more important because I don't really – the rankings for these prospects I do agree with for the most part, and I usually use some of that to prove who the top guys are. But we've seen it time and time again where a 23rd out of top 30 for a team prospect comes up and makes a major impact. Not saying that any of these guys are going to do that because I just haven't really seen anything like exponentially special from them. But you never really know because all it takes is for a Luis Ortiz-esque season in the minors for you to really get going. And there's one guy that we're going to talk about here when I start mentioning these prospects that did do that and was actually on this show not too long ago. But for starters, Dario Lopez is a guy that I've had my eye on for quite some time in the Pirates minor league system. He only has 39 innings of defensive work at first base in the minors, though, much more of a third baseman and a shortstop. He is a career 285 hitter with a 793 OPS and 31 home runs, which 19 of those came in 2022. And that was one of the big things that kind of stung, especially for the depth at first base in the minor league system, is that he dealt with an injury that sidelined him throughout 2023. So he wasn't able to expand on the 2022 season that he had, which was the best season of his minor league career. As I mentioned, almost 20 home runs that year, and he was mashing the baseball. And he could eventually end up being a potential first base option down the line. But a lot of factors have to work out in his favor for that. One, he would have to just play the position more. Two, we have to see what Dario Lopez looks like when he returns upon injury after not having played for almost 2 years. So that's going to be a lot of different things that you have to focus on with Lopez, but he is the highest ranked prospect of all the guys that I could see playing the first base position. So I think that's really fun. And then you look at Garrett Forrester, a guy who the Pirates just drafted, so obviously very far away. He is the highest ranked true first baseman in the system right now, and he was selected, of course, in the 3rd round of the 2023 draft. And you look at his power and hit tool, it's 55 and 50. He's just still very young. He was a college bat as well. So by the time he comes up here, I believe he's already 22. So by the time that you're even talking about Garrett Forrester coming up here, he'll be about 25, maybe even 26. His MLB ETA is at 2026. So there's still a lot of work that Forrester has to do. There's still a lot of work that the Pirates need to see from him. He hasn't been above Bradenton yet, obviously having just gotten into the organization not even 7 months ago. And he hit 278 with an 830 OPS at Bradenton, but albeit that was only in 18 at-bats. Forrester, of course, he'll be a guy that a lot of Pirates fans, if you follow the farm system, are going to keep a close eye on in 2024, seeing as he is the top-ranked true first baseman in the Pirates system. A name that a lot of you mentioned to me, a name that I also like a lot, but a guy who also dealt with injury in 2023 was Matt Gorski. Plenty of first base experience for Matt Gorski. He is a primary outfielder, so that also gives the Pirates a little bit of flexibility once Gorski returns to let him both play corner outfield spots while also playing first base. He only has 65 plate appearances to look back on in 2023 due to injury. And you look at what he's done as a defensive player in the minor league system. He has a career .991 fielding percentage at first base in 270 innings, and he's obviously very adequate defensively in the outfield as well, having played all 3 outfield spots in his minor league career. And you also look at his career OPS of 763 and 64 home runs, and I think that's a fun blend of defensive power if he remains healthy. Now, again, same question about Gorski that comes back about Dario Lopez. How does he look in 2024 following an injury that sidelined him for much of 2023? And what do the Pirates want to do? Do they want to put a kid who's 6'2", 198 pounds, which is a build that works at first base or the outfield? Do you want to stick him in right field, a place where a lot of people would like to see improvement after seeing Henry Davis and Joshua Palacios man that position for much of the 2023 season? Or do you want to flirt with the idea of putting him at first base to try to patch up that hole and also play alongside Jared Triolo if that's really what you want to do? That's going to be something that they're going to have to ask themselves as well. But I am excited for Matt Gorski. I'm excited to see what Gorski can offer this team in 2024. And I wouldn't be shocked if he's on the big league roster at some time in 2024. I just think due to his injury in 23, you're going to probably see that later in the season, potentially like a July or August at the earliest. And if he didn't get injured, I'd argue that he'd have a chance to make it out of spring training camp. So that's something that we'll have to keep a close eye on. A name that has been highly touted since the Pirates acquired him is Malcolm Nunez. He was acquired in the Jose Quintana trade in 2022, which also brought back Johan Oviedo. Get well soon. And you saw the drop in his numbers after the Pirates acquired him in 2022 to 2023. But, I mean, he still had a 717 OPS, not anything that's going to jump off the page for anyone. But I usually expect that when you talk about an OPS and you see that it's above 700, you can usually be at least somewhat positive about those numbers. But he has a career 811 OPS, and some of those drop-offs that we saw from Nunez last year, now albeit he also dealt with injury in 2023, you also saw his home run power dip as well, which was something that I was very concerned about when I was looking at Malcolm Nunez after the season ended and throughout the season. He had 23 home runs in 2022. That dropped down to 8 in 2023, again, albeit in considerably less at bats. He could play both first and third base, though. Remains to be seen if he'll get back to that 2022 minor league form. Remains to be seen if he'll just end up being a depth third baseman on this team, or if they do decide to move him to first base, if he can regain some of that power element that he was so highly touted for in the St. Louis Cardinals system. You look at other notable players, Tony Blanco Jr., one of my favorite prospects in the system at 6'7", still very young. Not sure if he'll play first base or the outfield. If you look on MLB Pipeline, he's listed at both positions. Still a very young kid. I believe he just turned 19. So he's going to be a very, very long ways away, and he's much of a project. A guy that we've had on this show before, Josiah Seitler, is also in the top 30. MLB ETA of 2025. Obviously possesses a good power tool. Had a 909 OPS in 2023, which opened a lot of eyes. He did get a lot of attention from fans in the front office. Moved up the system a little bit after a pretty good season. Really, his biggest concern is going to be his contact moving forward. I think that's what you're really looking for from Seitler. But if he can improve that, he could be a valuable player in 2025 and beyond. But again, like you're kind of seeing a pattern, he is a little too far away. You look at Jace Bowen. He's another outfield first base option. Had his best statistical season in the minors in 2023. Posted career highs in OPS, slugging, home runs, and RBIs. Obviously, another 2025 MLB ETA guy, and he's 23 years of age. So he'll have to continue to refine his skills at the plate. And at 23, having an ETA of 25 and beyond really just depends on his improvements. A guy, again, that you'll probably see come up at the age of 25 or 26, much like we've seen with Jared Triolo. So that's kind of what's going on. And you can kind of guess that right now, I wouldn't say that it's really the lack of prospects number-wise. It's more of the lack of prospects that you have that would be available for you next year. I'd really argue that the only two guys you can make a big argument for are Matt Gorski and Dario Lopez and maybe Malcolm Nunez. But there's a lot of question marks surrounding those guys, which makes it concerning. The future of this position, by the way, has been predicated a lot on outside additions in the past couple of seasons, but could they find another one in 2023 and 2024 to really hone this position down? We'll end today's show talking about that in just a moment. All righty, everybody. Thank you for tuning into the final segment of today's episode of Locked On Pirates here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Again, we're at your team every day. My name is Ethan Smith. Been a fun episode so far. We've talked about Sarah Gels. We've talked about Jared Triolo. We've talked about some of what's in the system and why it could be concerning that a lot of it is too far away and what that means for the first base position. So what does the future hold for the first base position for the Pittsburgh Pirates? And that's a really tough question to ask because I think, again, a lot of us really expect the Pirates to go out and sign a player in free agency that can play first base, be that CJ Cron, be that Carlos Santana, be that Rhys Hoskins, maybe even via trade for Vladdy or whatever they decide to do. But until we know that, it's a position that, again, I think is just going to warrant conversation that is hard to be positive about. A lot of that, I think, falls on Jared Triolo, if that's really what they decide to do with him. If they decide that they want Jared Triolo to be the guy at first base, there's a lot of pressure on him to figure that out, because then if he can't figure it out at first base, the cycle just continues again. So I do think at some point the Pirates are going to have to go out and just sign an adequate first baseman on a multi-year deal to give them time for guys like Josiah Seitler, Garrett Forrester, Jace Bowen, all these guys that we're really could be excited about that have potential, but also aren't going to be ready, let alone next year or the year after that. I mean, you really aren't thinking about guys like Josiah Seitler, Garrett Forrester, Jace Bowen until 2025, 2026. So when you're really boiling it down, you have one of two options here going into 2024 and even 2025 if you're the Pittsburgh Pirates. You either go out and sign a guy like CJ Crone or Reese Hoskins or whoever to a multi-year contract to really solidify that first base position, or you even go out and do it via trade with some of the pieces that you have in the minor league system, because you have a lot of pieces in the minor league system that could be intriguing to other teams. But you really have to decide which direction you want to go. Do you want to go that direction where you go with the outside addition, or do you want to give Jared Triolo every option to try to win that job and be your first baseman of the future? Jared Triolo, again, I think he has the tools to do it. I think if he can continue to improve with the power element of his game while not sacrificing a lot of his average, I think he could be a fine addition at first base as the everyday first baseman. It's not like they don't have other options as well. You could also put Henry Davis there if that's something that they wanted to consider. You could also still have Connor Joe there as kind of a bridge player. We've heard that term used in the NFL a lot about bridge players that are just waiting for the following draft, but we also know that in the NFL draft, those players usually make an impact instantly in the higher rounds rather than an MLB where it takes 2 or 3, sometimes even 4 or 5 years before those guys really make an impact on a roster. And there are options out there. I mean, we've mentioned some of them already. You could also look at a guy like Brandon Belt for one season if you really want to. He's going to give you at least something, and he can platoon alongside Jared Triolo, which is something that I also think the Pirates would be pretty wise to do, is to have a lefty power bat alongside Jared Triolo, just in the case of Jared Triolo not tapping into some of that power that I think he could potentially tap into. But you have to do something with the position, because at some point you can't expect the Pirates to you can't expect that everything's just going to go right at that position eventually, when you really haven't had a solid, steady, consistent option since Josh Bell. And even Josh Bell wasn't all that consistent for much of his career with the Pittsburgh Pirates. And you really go back and it was Pedro Alvarez. And there's just been a lot of turmoil with this position for quite some time. There's been a lot of question marks with this position for quite some time. And I think when you look at what the future holds, I think that Seitler, Bowen, or Forrester will pan out. I do think some of those guys have a lot of high floors and low ceilings. So I think they could eventually be contributors to this team. It's just going to be quite a while before we see that. So when you're looking at how the Pirates are going to attack this, I do think they are going to assign an outside addition at the first base position at some point, which also doesn't mean that Jared Triolo won't play the position at all. He could just have a platoon partner on that side of the baseball for the Pittsburgh Pirates. And I think that that's the best way to go. Go sign a guy that's going to bring some power to that position when Jared Triolo is not playing there. And it still opens up the door for you to let Jared Triolo play a second base or a third base on days where Peguero, Gonzalez, or Bay or Hayes need a day off. And even O'Neal Cruz, he could play a little bit of shortstop too, which also means you're not sacrificing a dip in production at first base as well. So I think that's the position that the Pirates are in right now, is Jared Triolo. It is his job to lose as of November 30th, but I do expect the Pirates to go get an outside addition to kind of bridge that gap between the guys that they have in the system right now that are still a ways away. And I think that's what we can expect moving forward. Folks, thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Locked On Pirates here on Thursday, November 30th. As mentioned before, follow me on Twitter right there at MVP_Ethan or at Locked On Pirates for all of your news, analysis, opinions, and reactions for everything going on in the world of the Pittsburgh Pirates. You can find this show on YouTube, Spotify, Odyssey, Google Play, or wherever you get your podcasts. And make sure you check out Locked On Sports Today, YouTube's first 24/7 sports streaming service. So, guys, thank you so much. Have a wonderful rest of your Thursday afternoon and evening. I'll see you tomorrow. But until then, see you on the flip side, everybody.